Categories and resources. So for the next little bit, we'll go through how to create our category and how to create how to create the resources underneath it. So to create the category, we'll start off under Configuration, Administration, and Categories. Again, before we create the category, we always want to keep in mind that the category is basically a container for resources. So we're not only defining the actual box we're keeping all the stuff in, but also the rules for booking any of that stuff. So when I create the category, go ahead and hit New. And for instance, if I say I wanted to create my audiovisual category, we'll always prefix it, as you can see we've done in the background here, with AV or catering or anything like that. Makes it a whole lot easier if everything's similar rather than, for instance, having something that's fully spelled out. Makes it a lot easier for your users to know what they're looking for and for you to identify it anytime you run a report. So again, I title it AV dash and then whatever building or location it applies to. Again, that makes it a whole lot easier when we run a report, set up a notification or anything to know exactly which AV category I want to pull. After that, we want to set up the category type. So realistically, we have three options anytime we set up a category: catering, resources with and without service orders. The big difference between those would be the categories without service orders have no specific time and use. What that means is that if I book a resource without service orders, the system will pull it out of inventory for the duration of the booking that it's tied to. So if I tie my LCD projector to a 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. booking, then the LCD projector will be out of inventory from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. A resource with service orders allows me to set the specific time and use. So maybe I only wanted that LCD projector from noon until 2. If it was a resource with service orders, I could have specified that. Catering is kind of a special case of resources with service orders, where again, typically for catering, I want my AM break delivered in the morning, lunch delivered at lunch, PM break in the afternoon. I don't want them all dropped off at 8 in the morning when my event starts. For the most part, as much as possible, I want to set my AV equipment as a resource without service orders because it'll make it a whole lot easier for users to order things. It also makes it a whole lot easier to deal with the inventory in the system. Once I've set that, I have a whole bunch more fields. So the first one, default time and use, again, we'll almost always want to set to the reserve time. Basically, that makes sure that the resource is booked for the duration of not only the event time, but also the setup and teardown that I've associated with that booking. Really what that's doing is making sure that the service provider has a bit of a buffer time to deliver the piece of equipment or to get it back after the event's ended so that they're not having to basically magically make that piece of equipment appear 3 floors up in another room as soon as one meeting ends. We also set a default quantity, so here we just set it to 1, pretty standard for AV. Where at catering, we could have set it to setup count instead. My resources here will not be available to all buildings. I only want my AV equipment for this building available to bookings in that building, so I will not check that box. From here, we can also set the equipment to display in web, so if I want that equipment to appear bookable on virtual, I have to check that box. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean that all of the equipment is available on virtual, just that some of the equipment could be available on virtual. We can also set a cutoff hour time. So here, if I put in, say, 24 hours, then any virtual user can request that equipment up to 24 hours before their booking starts. Once they're within that 24-hour period, they'll no longer be able to add, edit, or remove any of the AV equipment from this category from their booking. In that case, they would have to call an EMS client user or somebody in the AV team to have that equipment removed, added, or edited for them. From here, we can go to our Buildings tab, and now we have to decide which building is this equipment going to be available in. So again, we pick whichever building it would be available to. Again, this way we know that if my equipment exists in Philadelphia, it won't accidentally get booked to the UK or vice versa. Once we've done that, we can go ahead and hit OK, and we've got our category created. So now we want to create the resources within that category. So go to Configuration, Resources, and I'll see the category I just created. So I'm going to click on that. I'll get my resources screen. So the first thing I want to do before I create any resources, set up the groupings for those resources. So AV-example in this case is the box that all my equipment belongs to, but we can also create groupings to kind of sort the equipment within that box. So for instance, in my groupings for my AV, I might have, say, audio and video. So that way I can break up, say, my microphones and speakers into my audio equipment, my LCD projectors and screens into video equipment. We can certainly have a none category to deal with easels, things like that. Once we've created our groupings, close, and go back to our resources, we can hit new. So from here, use an easy example. I want to create my portable LCD projectors. So we put in the description. Here the description is really important because virtual users will see that description. So it needs to make sense to them so they know exactly what piece of equipment it is that they're ordering. That said, it should also make sense to the AV team so when they see this on a report, they know what the user actually wanted in their room. Next, we assign this to a grouping. So my projectors go to my video grouping. We can then also check maintain inventory. So here, if I have a limited number of LCD projectors, I want to list that so that the system knows when somebody tries to book the third LCD projector at a given time, a virtual user would not be allowed to book it, and a client-side user would get a warning letting them know they would be going over the inventory. So again, the inventory here only is binding for your virtual users. A client user can still always override that if they happen to know where to get an extra one or if they need to go out and rent it. From there, were this a catering item, we could also list how many it serves in the minimum quantity. Again, those really don't apply to my LCD projector at all, but for any catering stuff or any disposable pieces of equipment, I could certainly list those. I can also include an alert. The alert will only appear for a client-side user, but it can be a useful way to remind a client user that they may also need to book a second piece of equipment with it. So for instance, I may book the LCD projector. The alert may remind me that I also need to go and book a screen with my projector and make sure that the room has one. Keep in mind that the alerts do not appear on the virtual side, so they won't be helpful for your virtual users. However, the notes will appear in virtual for any user who books this piece of equipment. So notes are a great place to further describe the piece of equipment, to make any additional notes for the user to let them know how it should be used, where it should be used, or anything else they may need to be aware of with that piece of equipment. From there, we want to decide, is this piece of equipment available on the web? If so, we check the box. We will not ever be checking available at checkout. All of the equipment needs to be available post-checkout once the user's already booked their space. From there, we can go to our pricing. So if this piece of equipment should have any costs associated, we can go ahead and set the pricing here. For the most part, we really only care about the standard or the UK standard pricing methods. Mark it as unit if there's a fixed cost, and however much that piece of equipment costs. From there, we can also include any additional images. So if I wanted to show a picture of the item, if people tend to get confused over what an LCD projector is, you can certainly include as many pictures as you want. And the pictures should generally be about 320 by 200 to 640 by 480, or else they get a little too big for the pop-up window and become difficult for the user to see. From here, we can also go to our excluded rooms tab, and I can very easily go through and say, for the building that equipment is available in, I don't really want them using it in this particular space, perhaps because that space already has a built-in LCD projector. I don't want a virtual user booking the portable one to the same room. Again, excluding the rooms here is only binding to the virtual user. So a virtual user cannot override this. In fact, if they booked this copy of CH1 room, they would never see the LCD projector as an available option to add. However, a client-side user can always override that exclusion. For instance, if the built-in LCD projector is broken, I may still need to book the portable projector to that room. However, the system would give you a warning just to remind you that you may not really want to book that piece of equipment to that location. Once we're done, hit OK, and we've built our resource. If, again, excuse me, if I needed to, I could certainly copy the resource if you have a whole lot of very similar pieces of equipment, or I can add additional resources from here. Last thing I would point out with the resources is if my LCD projectors all go offline, none of them are going to be usable for a period of time. All I have to do is hit edit. I can then mark that projector as inactive. And that way, any current bookings that have that piece of equipment attached would still have it attached. So I could then go out to my browser, Query Builder, whatever, find all of those bookings and make sure that they get a new piece of equipment or move to a room that has it built in. But it won't be selectable for anybody creating a new reservation. The option just won't appear. Once I've fixed the equipment or it's available again, I can just check Show Inactive. It'll show me that piece of equipment in red italics, highlight it and hit Edit, and then I can just uncheck the inactive box, and that piece of equipment will be fully available again in the system. Cool. So that's pretty much creating my categories and my resources.
Cool.